In this video, we're going to talk about factoring trinomials. Trinomials, tri, meaning three-termed polynomials. And in every case, the lead coefficient, the coefficient of the square term, will be +1, the assumed +1. Now, before we start, though, we want to recall that when we have two binomials, two-termed polynomials connected with multiplication, we can multiply this out using an acronym that many people know as FOIL. That is, you take the product of the first term, x times x would get us x squared, times the product of the plus the product of the outside, so that's plus 2x, plus the product of the inside, plus 1x, and then finally, first, outside, inside, last, the product of the last terms. That's where the FOIL comes from. And that would give us a +2. So that gives us 4 terms, F-O-I-L. But then, most often, you're going to combine the outer and the inner terms by addition, and that will give us, in this case, 3x for that middle term. But it shrinks it down to a trinomial. So we have x squared plus 3x plus 2 as a result of that multiplication. Now what we're going to do is reverse that product. That is, start with the x squared plus 3x plus 2 and work backwards, if you will, to figure out what two binomials would multiply and give you a result of x squared plus 3x plus 2. And because in our problems we're going to have the lead coefficient always being the assumed 1, so we'll always have an x in both of the first positions of the binomials. But what we're looking for, again, going back to how we multiplied these things out, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to our back number of +2 because of what we saw up here with the FOIL. That was the last that tells us we multiply to get that back number. Now the more complicated part, though, is we also need the two numbers that we're looking for to go in these spots to combine when we do our outer plus inner. So when I say combine, add or subtract depending on their sign, so I'll just say add to, in this case, a +3. So we had a 2x and a 1x that gave us a 3x, so we need a +3. And of course we have the answer right above, x plus 1, x plus 2, and of course the only factors of 2 are 1 and 2. So there's not a lot of choice here, and we note that 1 plus 2, 1 times 2 gives us 2, and 1 plus 2 gives us a 3. So you see how those numbers, plus 1 and plus 2, would work and meet our criteria, and that's why those numbers go into the factors. And the net result of the two binomials, that's considered to be factored. That is, now we have two things connected with multiplication, whereas we started with 3 terms connected with addition or subtraction. So this is the process we're going to work on. So let's move this up so we can get some space to look at a new problem. Okay, so let's start with x squared plus 7x plus 6. Okay, so in this problem, again, we're working on reversing FOIL. So we're looking at two binomials, or to find two binomials. We know the first term in each will be x, but the question is, what will be the back terms that go with them? So, as we just explained, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to our back number. So in this case, that's +6. Two numbers that multiply to +6. But these numbers also have to add to the number in the middle, which in this problem is +7. So one approach is to start by listing all the factors. So 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and that's it for 6. If you go to the 3, we've already got a 3. Then we can check these by adding them, and 1 plus 6 gives us 7, which is the one we want. Notice that 2 plus 3 gives us 5, not the one we want. So since 1 and 6 give us our numbers, those are the ones that are going to go into the factors. Plus 1, plus 6. And you can always check yourself by multiplying it back out again, which is a good idea. All right, let's look at another one. Very similar problem, but we're going to change the 7x to minus. So that doesn't change what we're multiplying our numbers to, but it does change the sign anyway of what we're adding them to. So we're still multiplying to positive 6, but adding to negative 7. So again, our goal is to get these two binomials, so let's write them out. X is in the front spot, and we're going to talk about how to figure out the numbers go in the back spot. So again, 6 is the factor, so 1 and 6, 2 and 3 are the only pairs of factors that give us a 6, dealing with integer numbers. And we already know that 1 plus 6 gives us 7, but how do we get a negative 7 out of that? Well, we have to go back and remember that in order to multiply to a positive, you could have two positives, but you can also have two negatives. So if we think of these as negative 1 and negative 6, we can note that negative 1 times negative 6 does give us a positive 6, and negative 1 plus negative 6 gives us a negative 7. So those would be the numbers that go into our factors. So let's try another one. This time, again, very similar problem. But now we are changing the middle number completely. So x squared plus 5x minus 6. So our goal is the same. Break this down into two binomial factors. X is in the front. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 6. And add to our middle number, which, like I said, has changed, positive 5. So when we made the list before, the factors are 6, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. But we notice this time, very important, that we have a negative on our multiply number, which means one of the numbers is going to be positive and one of them is going to be negative. And when we add numbers, that's a messy plus, sorry. When we add numbers with different signs, what we're really doing is subtracting their absolute values. So rather than think, when we say the word add, that's the technical word, but in our mind, we're really talking about good old-fashioned takeaway, and then we'll deal with the signs. So out of these numbers, if we were to subtract them, larger minus smaller, 6 minus 1 is 5, where 3 minus 2 is 1. So we can see the number we're interested in is the one that has a 5. But now we have to go back and think about signs. What signs will get us that positive 5 that we're looking for? And so again, back to our sign rules. When we add numbers with different signs, we subtract their absolute values and give it the sign of the larger. So in this case, out of 1 and 6, the larger is 6. So 6 will be positive and 1 will be negative. And then we should always double check that these numbers do what we're saying they do before we go put them in the factors. So negative 1 times positive 6 multiplies to negative 6. Does that. What about a negative 1 plus a 6? Sure enough, it gives us a positive 5. So we're ready to put those numbers, minus 1 and positive 6, into the binomial factors. All right, one more. How about if we make that 5 a minus? How is that going to change things? Well, we're still looking for a multiply of negative 6 like we were on the previous problem. but we want to add this time not to a positive 5, but to a negative 5. So 1 and 6, 2 and 3, we're getting to know those numbers pretty well. And again, subtracting, because the multiplied number is negative, different signs, one positive, one negative. So that would give us a 5 and a 1, and we know we want the 5, but how do we get that negative? Well, again, sign of the larger. So if we're looking for a negative result on the 5, then the larger one has to be negative, and the smaller one positive. So let's double check again. Does positive 1 times negative 6 give us negative 6? Sure does. And does negative 1 minus 6 or negative 1 plus negative 6 give us negative 5? And it does. So we're ready to put in a plus 1 and a minus 6. Now, of course, this process, when the numbers get larger, there's just more combinations, more things to try. But these 4 problems give us the basic sign possibilities, which can be applied to any other problem, just a little bit more work because of more possibilities to try to find the right 2 numbers. So this is what we call factoring trinomials.